Hi, this is Emma from Visit DeKalb, and this is the start of a series called Discovering DeKalb County, Indiana. In this first episode, we're going to be talking about how Garrett, Indiana actually played a pretty big role in one of Hollywood's most remade films. If you like the video and are interested in more video essays like this one about weird little nuggets of history from our community, go ahead and check out our website and socials linked in the description below. Thanks for watching. If you look up on your friendly neighborhood search engine, what is the most remade film in Hollywood, the answer will either be A Christmas Carol, Alice in Wonderland, or a little film called A Star is Born. There are 4 different versions of A Star is Born, and while all of them are pretty different and rehash in almost opposite eras, there is one thing that does not change and that stays consistent across all 4 films, and that is the character of Norman Maine. Played first by Frederick March in 1937, then by James Mason, Kris Kristofferson, and finally, Bradley Cooper, Norman Maine is an icon in cinema, and he represents the first real recognition of
the price that must be paid in heartbreak and tears for every moment of triumph in Hollywood.
Norman was created and fleshed out by the director and story writers of the first rendition of the film, William Wellman and Robert Carson. But of course, Norman Maine had already existed. Enter Garrett, Indiana, a small town north of Fort Wayne and settled in quiet but charming DeKalb County. As it turns out, famous people can be from the Midwest. And as it turns out, the real Norman Maine was born right here. Well, he wasn't born in a parking lot, but most records do show that he was born around here at 117 Cohen Street in Garrett, Indiana, sometime in or around 1885. His name was John Bowersox. John Bowersox was born and raised in Garrett. He was an average guy. He played football, went to the lake, and did whatever else kids did in the 1890s. One day, he grew up and his parents are like, go and be a lawyer or something. And John is like, okay, whatever. Even though he was interested in theater a little bit in high school and he was doing community plays and stuff like that. So he goes to Huntington Business College and discovers that he doesn't really like law, big surprise, but he's been doing more and more theater. And he meets this guy named C. Garvin Gilmain. This Gilmain guy was actually kind of a mentor to Bowersox and eventually recommended him to a touring company. After this, John Bowersox decides he wants to become an actor of the stage and leaves college for Michigan to begin rehearsals for that touring company his buddy Gilmain recommended him to. He had found his place, and John stayed on the stage, becoming a pretty great actor, and he even moved to New York and began appearing on Broadway in 1912. But as the film industry rose in the West, John left New York. He went to Hollywood.
Before you lies the most glamorous city on earth, Hollywood, California. A city where men and women skyrocket to fame or plunge to oblivion.
Debuting in 1914 in the short film The Baited Trap, John quickly grew to stardom, dropping the OX off of his name, becoming John Bowers, and putting his nose to the grindstone for real. He took on loads and loads and loads of work, and he acted in 11 feature films in 1918 alone. After 1918 and through to 1923, his most famous films were made, like The Ace of Hearts, Lorna Doone, and Betsy Ross. All these films feature John Bowers in a leading role. He was a leading man and a hero in almost all of his films. He was totally famous, and it seemed that John Bowers was now a Hollywood star. He had the money, the wife, and the reputation. It looked like John from little old Garrett, Indiana, had finally made it. Until...
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you, you ain't heard nothing.
In 1927, the first talking picture was released by Warner Brothers. It was called The Jazz Singer. All of a sudden, it seemed that silent films were obsolete. Many silent film stars tried to break into the new wave of talkies, but few were actually able to, and that included John Bowers. He started drinking heavily, started drifting away from Hollywood and acting, from his wife, and soon came back to Indiana to look after his ailing mother. For a short time, he wrote for the Garrett Clipper, but that didn't really last or fulfill him. Eventually, after the death of his mother and after his wife had separated from him, he caught wind that his friend, Henry Hathaway would be directing a new film starring Gary Cooper, a new, more adaptable Hollywood star. John Bowers decided to try his luck and went to Hollywood one last time. And he had just gotten his hopes up. Henry Hathaway was not able to give him the role that he so desired, and Bowers considered himself to have become a has-been. So, with nothing ahead of him, he rented a sailboat in Santa Monica and sailed off into the sunset, his body washing up ashore a few days later in Malibu. His death was a shock to many in California and in Indiana. Although it seemed that John Bowers had slipped into obscurity forever, obviously he had not. John Bowers, the man who thought himself so obscure that he took his own life, inspired one of the most enduring characters in cinema and pop culture history, a tragic example of the price of fame. For almost a century, Norman Maine has remained an icon on the silver screen. Though replayed and reworked, one thing remains the same. A star was born here.